Okay. Well, good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you are, and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Casey Murphy, and I'm ACT's Director of Programs and Events. I want to thank you for joining us today for ACT's first of two webinars this month entitled Connecting the Return to Office and School to TDM. Before we hear from our presenters this afternoon, I wanted to quickly take care of a few housekeeping items. First, all attendees are on mute during this webinar. If you have a question or have a problem hearing us, please feel free to send a direct message to me or type it in the chat box located in the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. We will do our best to get your questions answered as we get going. Second, we will be hosting a Q&A at the end of everyone's presentation today. So please feel free to type in a question though as we go. And please also note who the question is for when typing it in so we make sure we direct the question to the right person. Finally, this session is being recorded and we'll have it up on the ACT website within 24 hours after the presentation ends today. Now I'd like to pass things over to David Strauss, ACT's Executive Director, to give an update on what ACT currently has going on. David?
Thanks, Casey. Good afternoon and welcome everybody. It has been a month since our last official webinar, but that doesn't mean we haven't been busy. We hosted our first ever Future of Commuting Summit. We had our How to Be an Effective Advocate training sessions, and as well yesterday's policy briefings as part of our inaugural TDM week. So be sure to continue posting and sharing information on social media and ACT's Connect community about the benefits your TDM programs are delivering to your communities, and use the hashtag TDM Week to help us continue promoting it. As the premier association for TDM professionals, ACT's goal is to build a strong community of professionals and organizations working to advance and implement TDM at their work sites and within their communities. Webinars like today's are an important benefit to you as a member of ACT, providing you with valuable information on latest trends and important knowledge to make you more impactful in the work that you do. Before we get started, I just want to take a moment to update everyone on some of the news from the association. In addition to it being TDM week, ACT is continuing to recruit co-sponsors for the More Through TDM Act. This important piece of legislation will codify TDM at the federal level, provide over $1 billion in new funding for TDM programs, for TDM programs, and require that all states incorporate TDM as part of their long-range transportation plans. If you think your member of Congress should support the work that you do, I encourage you to use the email templates and resources available to you on our website to reach out to them and let them know and ask for their support as a co-sponsor of this legislation. It also may be hard actually to realize that we will be hosting in 3 months, just less than 3 months, ACT's 35th Annual International Conference. The premier event for TDM professionals will feature dozens of breakout sessions, keynote speakers, exhibit hall, and social activities at the happiest place on earth in Walt Disney World. We know that there are members that have concerns about COVID safety precautions, and I encourage you to visit the conference website to see all of the distancing and cleaning protocols that will be in place for the event. We hope that as vaccines continue to roll out across the country and organizations start to permit travel, many more of you will be able to join us in person. To the non-members on the webinar today, I want to say welcome. I hope that you'll give some serious thought to joining ACT and becoming a member of our great community of over 1,300 TDM professionals. There's tremendous value that you receive from coming together within the largest community for TDM. After today's event, you'll receive a note from Elizabeth Denton, our membership experience manager, offering an opportunity to connect and learn more about ACT, and I hope you'll take her up on that offer. Now it's on to today's webinar, Connecting the Return to Office and School to TDM. As many organizations are now looking at fall 2021 as their return to office date, we know that families will be facing further challenges as they look to return children to school full-time. On today's webinar, we're going to be learning from our speakers on how we as TDM professionals in our organizations should start to look at incorporating this new challenge and working collaboratively with Safe Routes to Schools programs to build effective commuter programs. It's now my pleasure to welcome Becky Alper, who will lead today's session. Becky is the Outreach Director at Move Minneapolis, where she leads employer outreach, consulting with businesses on transportation challenges. She specializes in providing a policy and programmatic path towards a more sustainable future with measurable results. Becky led behavior change programming for St. Paul Smart Trips and Move Minnesota for 5 years, focusing on employer-based programs and neighborhood efforts. She holds both a master's and bachelor's degree from Clark University here in Worcester, Massachusetts. She won the ACT 40 Under 40 Award in 2018 and previously served as the Midwest Chapter's president. Becky, I turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, David. Can you hear me okay? See my screen?
Yep.
Awesome. Well, it's great to be here today. I'm excited to set the stage for what's going to be a terrific discussion about the connection between how kids get to school and how parents get themselves to work. So to start off, I want to give you my perspective as a TDM practitioner focusing on sustainable commutes, and also as the parent of a first grader at Minneapolis Public Schools. Just give me a moment. Let's see here. Great. Pardon me, it's allergy season here in Minneapolis. I believe we have truly reached crisis levels in school transportation. The pre-pandemic data shows that across the US, 54% of kids were driven to school. And unfortunately, in Minneapolis and in Minnesota as a whole, we don't really have the data. So we don't know how we compare to those national figures, if we're doing better or if we're doing worse. And needless to say, we also don't have the data about how school transportation impacts parent commute decisions. But what I do know is that we have situations like this on a daily basis. Is that a parking lot between the school playground and kids coloring with chalk? Why no? Those are idling cars in the school pickup line. And here's another school in Minneapolis, the pickup line, and oh, there's the playground. We already have the data linking poor air quality with lower academic performance. That leads us up to today, where we have nationwide bus driver shortages in both school bus and in transit. We have increasingly longer school bus routes. We have dangerous settings for walking and biking around schools, not to mention, of course, concerns about COVID exposure on school buses. So what are we to do? I'm going to go through a few strategies, and I encourage all of you to pop in the chat if your community, your school district, your local TMO, TMA is, if you're noticing any of these strategies in your community. So let's start by what not to do, and I'd be very curious to know if you've experienced this in your own community. This spring, Minneapolis Public Schools decided to pay families to transport their kids to school. And while they didn't say you had to drive your kids, driving is the norm here. So by not elevating other options, they implicitly supported driving. Instead, they could have paid families to carpool, to bike, or walk their kids to school. So I would say that is a strategy not to do. As a parent, I have no idea where other families and kids live. It's all private information. So using a tool like TripSpark's school pool option, where you can upload your entire school's registration into one system, that would make carpooling so much easier. So another strategy that's out there. I give that a check. And then I want to mention locally, there's a great partnership between Minneapolis Public Schools and our transit system, Metro Transit, which gives free transit bus passes to high school students. So they get their freedom and additional options beyond the school bus for sports, for after school activities and jobs. And our community benefits by having transit normalized. Give that a check too. So I'm going to check out what people have put in the chat. I encourage you to mention, if you're seeing any of these strategies happening right now in your community. I want to share some of my major takeaways from my dive into this topic. I really believe that we need more data. We need to make the connections more visible between air pollution and academic achievement, some of the connections between our short-term COVID-19 decisions and how they impact the long-term. We already have a lot of strategies out there from TDM, from the TDM field, from Safe Routes to School field, mix of infrastructure and behavioral programming solutions. I feel like we need to make the case that at time for action is now. And then last but not least, one other takeaway is that we really need to gain a better understanding of the connections between the student commute and the parent commute. So without further ado, I would like to introduce our other speakers. First, we'll hear from Nancy Pullen-Seufert with the National Center for Safe Routes to School and at the University of North Carolina Highway Safety Research Center. She has a wealth of experience and knowledge from her 18 years working on national strategies for student safety, and fun fact, was a full-time teleworker pre-pandemic. After Nancy speaks, we'll dive into programmatic elements with Nichole Hollis and Georgia Commute Schools. Nichole oversees an incredible 20-county region developing multimodal travel options programs. And last but certainly not least, we'll hear from Zara Seastrunk with Arlington Transportation Partners. And Zara has a unique position supporting TDM programs for school staff and employers. I'm particularly excited to hear from her about how parents are navigating these commuting challenges as students and staff return to the classroom. So with that, I will turn it over to Nancy. Thanks so much.
Nancy, you're on mute there.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, hi everyone. And
your video as well, sorry.
Oh, do you want my video on? Sure.
Yes, please.
Okay.
There you go.
Hi. This is as close to a three-dimensional as all of us get right now, I guess. So hi everyone. And I'm so glad to be here. And Becky did a great job kind of setting up our conversation today. And I want to tell you a little bit more about some things that she sort of had a chance to give us really an overview on. I'm going to start off by talking a little bit more about school travel patterns and kind of building off of what Becky talked about there. Talk about some of the challenges to school travel that we've seen nationwide during the pandemic, and then talk about some promising practices that we are seeing around the country. So basically, we're going to kind of take ourselves down, but hopefully end on a high note with some interesting glimmers of hope, I think. Okay, so as we think about school travel and sort of from the National Center for Safe Routes to School perspective, we really come from wanting to support safe walking and biking for students and families for all of their school trip, or at least part of their school trip, and of course, minimizing the amount of private vehicle traffic coming to a school. So then we could talk a little bit about how students got to school before COVID. And Becky set this up very nicely. And so you already know that more than half of families arrive by private vehicle. But we have a third of students who get to school by bus, and then just 10% who walk or bike, and roughly 2% for transit. But I do think it's important to note that 60% of families with low income have students who ride the school bus. And we also know that especially in urban areas, students from households with low income are more likely to walk and rely on walking as the way they get to school than their higher income students. So these are really important modes to support as we think about students getting to school safely. So let's look at just a little bit more at private vehicle trips to school and what we know about that. Based on a study that now feels like a long time ago, gang, published back in 2011, looking at the National Household Travel Survey and finding that 10 to 14% of morning commute time traffic is made up of trips for the purpose of school. And that about 40% of those vehicles that are going to school are going directly home again. So lots of opportunity there for improvement. So let's also take a look at what we know about how things are right now. And as Becky noted, we don't have good data for what travel patterns to and from school look like right now. We know what some of the realities are that we're facing, but I also think it's good just to note because where you live might be very different than what things look like nationally. And right now, of course, the vast majority of the country's public school students are attending schools that offer in-person learning 5 days a week. Big change from a year ago or even from September. But the other piece of that is that only part of the student population is actually going back to in-person school. So we certainly don't have a sense of what travel might look like come fall. So let's talk a little bit about what we know about the challenges now. If you're a parent, or you know a parent, or you live near a school, you could probably articulate some or all of the challenges that I've listed here, but I'm going to offer some up and see if maybe there's something new here for you. We are hearing from physicians and from transportation professionals that parents are concerned about COVID transmission on school buses, so they're reluctant to put their kiddos back on the school bus. Meanwhile, we have school districts that have had to figure out how to transport students with capacity limits of how many students can go on a school bus. And then we also just have schools that typically might be involved with Safe Routes to School programming that and encouraging walking and biking that are just feeling too stretched to do that this year. And so they instead are prioritizing communications to parents and time at school really focused on academics. And then, of course, we don't know exactly what the virus will look like in the fall. So schools overall are talking about returning to school full-time in person, but also seem to be kind of keeping the virtual instruction plan in their back pocket. And I think we just all have a lot of questions, of course, about what vaccination and variances will look like. And finally, parents working from home. And what that can mean is that it becomes very easy for a parent to just pop their kiddo into their private vehicle, drive them to school, and then rush back again to get back online for their work. So what are some promising strategies? Well, a minute ago, I was just mentioning the fact that we have more parents working from home, and certainly that also can be an advantage, right? With so many people having spent so much more time at home than usual over the past year, some people have had a chance to find out that they really enjoy walking and biking, and they want to be able to keep doing that as part of daily life. They may have more flexibility in their work schedule as we transition back to workplaces in order to accommodate more distancing, or we might have more people who are working from home. Obviously, though, these are all things that are more for access for privileged people and doesn't necessarily address the needs of a lot of families. We also do have working in our favor, though, the fresh start effect, right? So the fact that after so many months of a lot of families really being away from the school building, we have a chance to restart expectations and communications and change habits a bit, just like we do on New Year's Day, right? Same kind of thing. So we also have a lot of communities that have experimented with how they use their streets. So if you have heard of or familiar with open streets or active streets, so basically streets that have been closed or limited to motor vehicle access to make more space for walking and biking. And so now we have community members that have had a little bit of experience in asking questions about who has a right to access on the street and what kinds of modes that I think helps set us up for really thinking about that when we think about the streets around schools. And finally, I want to let you know that we have a national level guidance committee that we have formed called our Safe and Healthy Return to School Committee that includes representatives from the American Academy of Pediatrics and CDC, school bus industry, and Safe Routes to School folks. Also focused on trying to pull together good examples that communities can use next year. And of course, we're looking for kinds of things that will be successful even beyond COVID, and supporting active travel. So I want to tell you about a few examples that we've learned about thus far. And one of those is the fact that we see communities that have been prioritizing their sidewalk construction help with connections between home and school. We are also seeing places that are using remote pickup and drop-off locations. So trying to limit the number of private vehicles that are going directly to the school and instead using parking lots or parking locations that are a quarter mile to a half mile from schools. And so that also gives an opportunity for a little bit of physical activity, as well as decreasing traffic congestion. We're also seeing staggered arrival and dismissal times. So what this can mean is that if you are a walker, you get dismissed before your private vehicle transported peers. So that can be an incentive as well. And then opening back school gates. So giving in the spirit of physical distancing and an interest in that, also being sure that that means that it supports students who live behind a school having kind of the easiest, most convenient access to get to that school or to get to potentially a remote pick up and drop off. We also are seeing street closures and lane closures. So this picture is from Seattle Department of Transportation, and they have street closures around a selection of their schools. So it's open only for local traffic and in a limited way. We also have seen examples of places that are closing the lane that is next to the sidewalk in order to give more space. So obviously talking about a multi-lane road, but to give more space for people who are walking and biking beyond just using the sidewalk for that. If you are interested in reading a little bit more about the street closure concept around schools, I've included right here a picture of an information brief that we released back in January with the Pedestrian and Bicycle Information Center. And you could just Google and find out more, or I can drop the link into the chat, of course. So we're also, just in closing, on the hunt for more good practices for how cities and schools and school districts, TDM programs have been making modifications this school year to support travel for students. And we want to be able to showcase those examples for other communities. Please feel free to drop me an email if you have observed some things that you think are worth sharing with other places. So on that note, I want to pass it along to my colleague, Nichole Hollis. Nichole.
Thank you so much, Nancy. And I will share my screen. Let's see. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nichole Hollis, and I am from a program called Georgia Commute Schools, and I'm the school program administrator for this program. And today I'm just going to talk to you guys about some things that we've done in our program, especially as you commute into a new normal in the fall. And here are just some pictures to highlight some of the activities from our program. So just a little bit about myself and notable projects that I've worked on. So a lot of my background revolves around safe routes to school, and I actually started out in the TDM world in 2013. And I've developed several initiatives working with local DeKalb boards of health, helping underrepresented communities. I've also worked with school projects and local DOTs, helping with transportation plans and helping to implement infrastructure. I've also worked with local law enforcement organizations, such as one of the largest one here in Metro Atlanta, Fulton County Sheriff Office, helping to do walk and bike initiatives. And also back in 2017, I worked with the city of Johns Creek with the council member there, helping to start a Safe Routes to School walk and bike initiative. And then back in 2020, I also worked with the Safe Routes Partnership under a group that was called a Back to School Working Group, helping to come up with strategies to implement for fall 2020 as the pandemic started to roll out more in this school year. And then also back in November, I was selected for ACT's 40 Under 40 Award, which I am truly grateful for. So as far as program overview, as far as Georgia Commute Schools, we are a program of Georgia Commute Options, and we operate under a 3P model, which is partnerships, programs, and promotions. And we've been in existence since August of 2018, covering a total of 20 counties. And we do programs that are focused around walk, bike, school bus. And we also have an anti-idling initiative that encourages drivers not to idle in the car rider line. And we work heavily with teachers as well, helping them to develop air quality lesson plans. And we also have a curriculum. And then our target audience is kindergarten through 12th grade schools. And we also operate with public, private, and charter schools. So just a little bit about our successes. We started our program, as I mentioned earlier, back in 2018. And since then, we've been able to grow our district partnerships to 54%, our school partnerships up to 130%, and our community organizations to 150%. And we also done innovative programs and promotions throughout the school year as another way to get students and schools involved. And each year we do 3 annual promotions, and the first one being National School Bus Safety Week. And for this promotion, we educate students about the importance of air quality. And then we also have a promotion in the spring that's called Air Quality Awareness Week, where we also educate kids and we focus more on air quality and air pollution. And then back in February, every February, we do a promotion that's called Love My Bus Month. And for this promotion, our goal is to increase bus ridership and get those students that are car riders to switch their commutes to riding the bus. And each year we have seen an increase. And last year we had a total of 10 schools to participate, and we increased up to 20 back in February. So we were very proud to see that increase there to 100%. And then as far as deep dive projects, that's also been another success of ours. We've worked with several schools throughout the Metro Atlanta region, including Tuskegee Airmen Global Academy, which is a school that we've worked with to help with walk and bike initiatives. We've also worked with Paulding County School District, where we've seen the majority of our partnerships come out of. And it's been really great to work one-on-one with STEM teachers and help them to spark interest with their air quality lesson plans, and also just to develop programs that fit their school's needs. And then we also work a lot with high school groups and help them to formulate transportation committees and work under existing clubs to help them to come up with transportation initiatives. And here's a photo from a high school's Love My Bus event that was held out in Gwinnett County in the region that we serve. So just a little bit of considerations that I wanted to provide as school programs, TDM focused programs, focused on activities that they can do to implement programming in the fall as you return to school. The first consideration is to deploy pilot programs. We found this to be very successful when we started our program back in 2017. We did a pilot initiative in certain areas around the region. And I encourage you to look at pilot programming from a remote, in-person, and hybrid standpoint, and target a small geographical area. As I mentioned earlier, we were able to work with the city of Johns Creek and help them to develop walk and bike initiatives. And then also researching the school and the surrounding community can be effective as well, and implementing travel plans and walk audits or bike audits just to look at what the barriers are around the community. And a lot of schools also have existing resources such as health and wellness policies, which you can get from administrators or principals, which can also be effective as you do your program. And then some schools nationally and also within our region have done pop-up projects where they've implemented temporary crosswalks and sidewalks as a way to see if it's a good opportunity for kids to walk and bike on a normal basis. And also diversifying outreach approaches is key. I know a lot of us that have done school programming over the last year, we've learned how to pivot in the types of offerings that we provide to schools and offering different opportunities for schools to get involved and doing short and fun and engaging activities from a remote, in-person and hybrid setting can also be effective. Some of the things that we've done is engage our students on social media with different activities for our promotions. A lot of schools use Flipgrid videos, and we incorporated that to have the kids do storytelling and talk about their experiences of riding the bus, and also to talk about how they would go about cleaning up the air in their own neighborhoods. And we also had kids to do illustrations as well, as you can see here. So incentivizing students is also important. One thing that we did for our Love My Bus promotion, as Nancy mentioned, a lot of students have concerns and families have concerns about riding the bus. And so we heard this a lot from our administrators, especially from families as well, about the challenges of students riding the bus. So we were able to provide things such as PPE materials in the form of masks and hand sanitizer as a way to ease those burdens just a little bit more. And I will also recommend virtual recognition and school student recognition as you look at opportunities to incentivize students as well. And then a lot of schools have what's called a PBIS program, which is positive behavior interventions and support. So looking for opportunities that you can tie in with their existing incentive programs and offer some opportunities for you to award students for the activities of commuting sustainably. And prioritization, so I would also recommend looking at underserved communities such as minority groups, low income and Title I schools that have suffered, especially that have transportation barriers in their community, and see how you can implement programming there, whether it be through a bike program, offering bikes or helmets or bike safety education, pedestrian education, and also working with community groups such as churches, places that already have buy-in from the community can also be effective. And as I mentioned, community buy-in, we do a lot of collaborations with different community groups in our program. And most recently, we were able to work with Free Bikes for Kids, which is a national organization that provides bikes to underserved students. And we had 2 schools that were rewarded with 150 bikes. And so we were able to offer these bikes through their program. And then also I would look at identifying key community groups that you can work with, such as local municipalities, advocacy groups, nonprofits, and colleges and universities that may have additional data that you can use in your program. And then we also seek out additional resources from groups such as Safe Kids Georgia, who has provided us with helmets, and also the EPA, which has provided us with air quality books to give out during Air Quality Awareness Week. So here are just some quick tips that I wanted to leave you with. No one size fits all. So as you develop TDM programming, school programming around students traveling to school, just keep that in mind, and also start small and keep it simple. And diversify your activities so that you're offering many ways for students that are learning at home and also in person to get involved in your program. And be ready to pivot at any time. I think we all can relate to schools changing every week and having challenges. So just being able to offer multiple options of programming for walkers, bikers, and car riders can also be effective. And before you do any type of programming, make sure to get the approval from principal and administrators and follow district and school guidelines. And I just want to say thank you again to ACT, and here's my contact information if anyone would like to reach out. And I'll pass it over to Zara.
Thanks, Nichole. Let me start sharing my screen. Okay, you guys can see my presentation. All right, so my name is Zara Seastrunk, and I'm a business development manager with Arlington Transportation Partners. Earlier this year, I took on a position working closely with Arlington Public School District in Arlington County, Virginia, which is right outside Washington, DC. But for the 2 years prior to that, I actually worked with employers to implement TDM programs and help with commuter transportation issues at the workplace. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about what employers and school administrators can do to help working parents, specifically teachers with young children at home or employees with young children at home, to understand how TDM and safe routes to school can work together and influence those commuting behaviors of parents as they plan to return to the classroom to teach or to the office in the fall. So as employers look forward to bringing people back to the workplace, in the DC metro region, we're hearing a lot of Labor Day, some maybe over the summer if things continue to go in the direction they're going, which is really exciting. But there are a lot of logistical challenges involved with reopening businesses. And it's important for employers to consider the challenges that working parents will face as they navigate their new commute. Parents make up 32% of the American workforce, and around half of public school teachers also have small children under 18 living at home. So when I was working on site with employers and employees and having conversations with commuters about how I could help, resolve some of their issues or suggest other options, some of the things I heard all the time were that they cannot commute on transit because they need to pick up their kid from school at a certain time, or they have to be at daycare. Otherwise, they get charged a fee. So it's just not an option. It's not reliable enough. Biking, walking's too far. There's all sorts of things that people would bring up, specifically around school and childcare transportation issues. Also, not having reliable or accessible transit options near childcare facilities was another issue that people struggled with in the region. So many of you might have children at home. You might be juggling some of these issues yourself. So you probably know better than I do how difficult it can be to coordinate transportation around school, sports, extracurricular activities, and work on top of that. And obviously COVID has disrupted just about everything when it comes to the commute. So there's a lot up in the air right now. Of course, every community has its own unique challenges around school and commuter transportation, and it's difficult to say how it's going to play out in the fall. But if there's one lesson that I've learned in the past year, it's that the pandemic didn't create as many problems as it's exposed some of the broken systems and exacerbated pre-existing issues that were already there long before the pandemic. So I'd like to take this opportunity to talk with you all about how we can explore some of those commuting concerns that working parents have and how schools and employers can help to address them as they start bringing people back in the fall. So looking back to 2017, a long time ago, a private ride-sharing company called Hop, Skip, Drive released a survey about how parents are impacted when kids go back to school. So what they found was that the hours that parents are spending coordinating transportation for their kids really adds up. 30% of parents were discussing transportation logistics every single day. 25% were discussing it several times a week. That makes it more complicated if you're a single parent or you have multiple kids, multiple activities that people need to go to. It gets really complicated. They actually found that 35% of parents would rather do their taxes or they found it more stressful to arrange their student transportation than like doing their taxes every year. So I think all of that really adds up to a lot of stress on parents, whether they're working from home or they're working in the office or they're teaching because they're a teacher and they have small children at school, at home. So 51% of parents spend at least 5 hours a week driving their kids around. I know when I was a kid, my mom would drive me and my brothers all around town, and that seems like all she was doing was driving. And there is a potential that that could be exacerbated in the fall when offices start to reopen and schools are open 5 days a week. So we want to encourage as many people as possible to explore other options and make it as easy as possible for parents to navigate their new options. So some other statistics that they found in the survey were 2 out of 3 working parents said that having to drive their kids somewhere disrupts their work on a regular basis. So there is definitely a mismatch between school and work schedules. That's always been a challenge for parents to coordinate student pickups and drop-offs depending on their work schedule, how far their work is from their home, how long their commute is. These are things that parents have to always consider and are only getting more complicated as schools open in hybrid schedules. And then, everything is changing week to week. 42% they felt they had put their job at risk to meet their child's transportation needs. One of the things that's been extremely concerning is how many women have had to drop out of the workforce, specifically due to childcare issues or school transportation issues. But there's also a bright side that a lot of people have been able to work from home and that a lot of telework policies have been expanded. So as we're looking to the future, I think it is really good to look back on how some of these problems have already been in place. These were back in 2017. This is not a new issue that we're dealing with. There we go. Okay, so some of those school transportation barriers, if you're a parent, this looks really familiar to you. That pickup and drop off times are out of sync with work schedules. Childcare availability is always a huge concern in Arlington. We've had childcare shortages for many years and the county has worked very hard to address some of those. But it is hard to find available options that are reliable and convenient near your work location. Parents juggling car seats, strollers, heavy items, it certainly makes it more challenging to go out on transit or hop on a bike if you have a huge backpack in tow. When you have multiple children going to different schools or daycare, it's a lot to coordinate. Inconvenient transit options, I'd mentioned, extracurriculars and after-school activities. Parents, of course, still have safety concerns about if their kids are walking and biking to school, how confident are they that they'll be able to get there safely? Emergencies, if your kid gets sick during the workday, how are you going to go pick them up? So, and long commute times, of course, have definitely cut into family time and impacted how present parents are able to be, because if you're sitting in traffic for hours and hours every day, that really does add up. Now that schools are mostly reopened across the region and we're navigating this return, this puts another layer of challenge and complexity to the issue. So budget constraints, reduced capacity on school buses, rapid changes to school operations and schedules, changes in mass transit operations and schedules as well, makes it more complicated for people to navigate. Student health screenings too. So with my district in particular, people have to have their temperature taken and complete a health screening every single day. And that slows down bus operations and the school drop-off line and makes things a little bit more complicated. We've also seen some issues with bus driver shortages and also crossing guard shortages. So we had a lot of people who were retirees who worked as a crossing guard part-time because they were passionate about that issue and they wanted to help kids get to school. And due to COVID, they're not as comfortable filling those positions, or it's been more of a challenge. And then this is a little bit of a joke about too much family time, but it's certainly a challenge to balance working from home when all your kids are home and you're also balancing remote learning. So it's just a lot. So teachers are parents too. So specifically dealing with the teachers in Arlington Public School community, if about half of them live outside of Arlington County, and if half of those teachers are also parents with kids that were working from home most of the past year, then it's not just Arlington Public Schools that are impacting them, it's also the districts that they're sending their kids to, or whether their childcare options are open and available. So this is something that Arlington Public Schools has surveyed parents, staff, and students about for the past 8 years. They have a great number of surveys which have amazing data that we can look back on. So these are actually from 2013 to 2016. And what we found when we asked staff what their top barrier to biking, walking, or transit was, they said 40% of them said they needed a car for travel before or after work. And when they asked where they were driving before and after work, a good chunk of those were going to childcare drop-offs or picking up their kids from other schools. So that teachers have been balancing this remote teaching and remote learning with kids at home for the past year. So I just wanted to highlight that it's been incredibly challenging. And I also want to encourage any employers that are maybe on the call to think about some of the creative TDM incentives that could help to address some of the root challenges that drive parents to pick up their car keys instead of their transit pass. So our school district is currently planning for expanded summer school services to help address learning loss from the past year. And there's been a lot of challenges with getting enough staff to agree to be on site over the summer. They've offered some bonus incentives and pay increases, but teachers have said that their main concern is having access to affordable and reliable childcare. So one of the things that APS did in the past year to kind of help address that issue was they modified their extended day program to provide on-site childcare during the workday to teachers. So they had 50 students between the ages of 4 and 11, and that helped to alleviate some of that juggling of like remote teaching and remote learning while they were at home. But this is going to continue to be an issue in the fall. So some of the TDM incentives that employers might want to consider or school administrators might want to consider, I would say that transit passes and direct subsidies and things that help with the cost of transportation are certainly very helpful and welcome. But sometimes it's more about convenience. Having on-site childcare options or nearby childcare options is important. Having telework and flexible schedule options is very important to parents so that they can help to manage their schedules and their kids. And then guaranteed ride home to give parents the peace of mind that they're going to be able to get home in case of an emergency is certainly another way to help. So parents, what they've said in the past about their ideal mode for their child's transportation, most of it was either the school bus, with 49% of parents saying that was their ideal mode, or walking, 44%. So only 6% of parents said that they prefer to drive their kids to school, but we've seen in practice that that is certainly not the case. So why are more parents choosing to drive their kids instead of take the school bus or instead of walking? So what we've seen from surveys in the past is that the school bus schedule was either too early or too late to meet their needs. It was challenging to coordinate those schedules, especially when it comes to like after school activities and sports, extracurriculars. That just made it more convenient to drive. And now with COVID, changes in school operations, hybrid schedules, and uncertainty about the return to work plans at their office, parents are just doing the best that they can to adjust to the unpredictable. So I think we have a long way to go to assuring parents that they're going to have access to the transportation options that they need that are most convenient to them. And that's certainly going to continue to be a concern in the fall. We also saw that bike and walk barriers for students. The number one concern that parents had was, of course, safety. So one of the things that our school district has done is expanded walk zones around school districts and encourage more students to walk or bike. But that helps to alleviate some of the bus transportation issues. But if parents aren't confident with their student being able to walk or bike to school, then are they going to bike or walk, or are they going to drive? So Safe Routes to School and Vision Zero, for that matter, definitely can and has made a big impact on building community confidence and addressing some of those safety concerns. So we certainly have a long way to go to get back to normal, but I believe that there are a variety of smart transportation solutions to help address these concerns of working parents and teachers in the fall. Today, you've seen some really great examples of how schools have optimized bus transportation, worked tirelessly to meet changing transportation needs, and help to encourage bicycling and walking all year long, even in a virtual setting. APS, I will say, has done a fantastic job of establishing a good working relationship in committees with local transportation planners and TDM professionals like myself to help address safety and traffic concerns, to put innovative pilot programs together to really change the built environment in a way that makes it safer and more accessible for students of all ages. So it's been really amazing to see what the school community has accomplished in these really difficult times. Some of the things that employers might want to consider this fall is continuing to offer and expand telework and flexible schedules to help accommodate families dealing with changing school schedules. Continuing to allow parents to work from home provides opportunities for parents to do what they do best. It's managing their own work schedules, school schedules, extracurricular schedules in a way that works for the whole family. I definitely encourage employers to think creatively about how we can address the root cause of commuter challenges, whether that's providing incentives to help with the cost or support services like on-site childcare, mental health resources, or even parent support groups to help drive behavior change and connect people to their community in a way that makes sustainable transit more accessible. And of course, guaranteed ride home is always great to give parents peace of mind. Some of the long-term community solutions that will, I think, make the biggest impact in addressing school transportation needs is transit-oriented development around school and childcare facilities. We really do need to make it easier for parents to drop their kids off on the way to work and pick them up on the way home and use a sustainable mode of transportation to get there. So investing in transit, bike, and pedestrian infrastructure that makes it safe and welcoming for the whole community to travel as sustainably as possible is going to be a necessary step in the process. I did have Vision Zero on here as well, but that's a great way to address some of the safety concerns around traffic issues and solve some of those problems to enhance confidence. So I will just say it's been a very challenging year, and I want to commend every single parent and teacher that's made it through the year in one piece. I really look forward to working with my community to help solve some of these problems. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today. And with that, I'll pass it back to Casey.
Thank you, Zara, and thank you to all of our panelists today for a job well done. Truly appreciate it. We're going to go ahead and try to get as many questions in for the group here as we can in the amount of time we have left. If you do have a question for our audience, please feel free to type it in the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen. This first question, Nichole, I'm going to direct to you first because it kind of came up while you were talking, but I'll also allow Nancy and Zara to chime in. The active transportation programs are wonderful, but what happens in climates where this will not be practical in the winter? Do you have any feedback for that?
Sure. So one thing that we do in the wintertime, especially this year because we're in a virtual setting, we lean on a lot more of the activities that students can do at home to still engage them about sustainable travel options, such as our Love My Bus Month promotion, which I talked about before, and how we've been able to use Flipgrid videos and other types of things to get their involvement outside of them actually traveling on the school bus. I can't hear. I don't know why I can't hear.
Oh, sorry. Anyone else want to chime in? Sorry. No, okay. This next one here, I'm going to put to all panelists. Nancy, I'll start with you. What sources of funding are available to support TDM for school transportation? Are there new ones resulting from the pandemic response?
I'm probably not the best person to answer this question, and there is both federal funding available. Pandemic response related funding is primarily, I think, been focused on yellow school bus transportation. Though given the administration's evident clear interest in concerns about climate change and wanting to support walking and biking and infrastructure, I think there's a lot of hope coming down the line. I think it's also very likely that we will see an opportunity for funding for sort of quick turnaround infrastructure projects. So projects that are already kind of planned or in the pipeline that are shovel ready. I think that the more that cities and communities can be thinking about those now and having them ready, for funding coming down the line will be a benefit.
Anyone else? Okay. This next one, I'll kind of pull to all three of you as well here, if anyone can answer. What are the top 2 to 3 strategies that schools should be doing right now to prepare for the fall of 2021 school year? And I'll start with you, maybe Nichole, on this. We'll work our way through the group.
Sure. So the first thing is to develop a plan of action. Like I mentioned in my presentation, especially if you're starting small in a virtual setting, or if you're starting in person, look at some opportunities that you want to do pilot programming in, which could be effective. And then the second strategy is also lean on, if you are an existing program, lean on your current contacts that you have and see how you can, build programming in those communities where you're interested in building programming. When we started our program back in 2017, when I was with Safe Routes to School, I was able to bring over some of those contacts that I had into our existing program that we have now. But looking at opportunities to work with groups that you've already had good relationships with, and just seeing how you can build on those programming strategies that you want to create for the fall, whether it be in one specific region or throughout your entire region.
Great. Zara or Nancy?
Sure. I will say from employer or administrative perspective, surveying employees about their transportation concerns and coming up with a communication strategy to engage them with resources so that they understand how their transportation options may have changed, and planning ahead for re-enrolling in any benefits that are available will be really important for me and for our school district in particular, as we're figuring out how to navigate some of those student transportation challenges as well.
I guess I would just add, for families who feel like they have options for how to travel, then we want to try to make the desired behavior be the easy behavior. So really understanding what are the barriers that are getting in families' ways and trying to make it as convenient as possible. I know a minute ago there was a question about cold weather travel. Well, what are the things that schools can do to make it feel more convenient for families? And it can be, one of those things can be providing, adequate storage for kids' snow boots and gear. So I think thinking in that regard, and also really starting now to build trust back with families, to help them understand what the benefits are, how they can be contributing as a member of a school community, by how they choose to get
That's
Casey, I'd like to pop in and just say, I
Yes.
think the easy, sometimes the easiest things school administrators are doing that I have noticed kind of as a TDM professional and as a parent here is that the easiest thing may not be the best thing for active transportation or for having kids take the bus. And schools have a lot on their minds right now, as one might imagine. And so, connecting with a champion who might be willing to champion some of these programs, to me feels like a strategy forward.
Excellent. Yeah, you brought up some great points that I think people could kind of take away with here. We kind of have reached the top of the hour, and I don't want to start a new question because I know we're going to go way over, and I apologize that we did not get to everyone's questions as more keep coming in here. And so I have everyone's contact information up. I encourage you to reach out to all of our panelists today. They are more than happy to answer your questions, make sure that you all have a successful 2021 when the school year does begin again. And I want to thank all of our panelists once again today for a job well done. Appreciate all your insight and input into this topic. It is much appreciated. And want to let all of you still on the line know here that we have another webinar coming up later this month on Tuesday, May 25th, sponsored by our good friends at Transloc. It's how transportation technology can help maintain public health during crises. And so please tune in and register for that. Registration will open early next week. And that's it. That's all we have for today. Once again, thank you to all of our panelists for joining us this afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you on May 25th. Thank you all. Have a great day.